Welcome to Dialogue, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. Nearly 2 weeks ago, 6 children and 1 young adult died in a fire at an illegal orphanage in Henan Province. In the days that have followed, many have asked questions about the quality of childcare in China. At a time when society is going through dramatic changes, what should be the role of government in protecting the most vulnerable members of our society? And more importantly, whose responsibility is it to protect the rights of young people, including the many abandoned or orphaned children? Joining us today in the studio to talk about this very important issue, we have Raymond Zhou, who is a columnist from China Daily. Welcome, sir.
Great to be here.
And also, we're very happy to be joined in the studio by Professor Wen Tiejun from Renmin University, who's an expert on China's rural issues. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
But before we go to a discussion with the two of you gentlemen, let's take a look at this background report.
Earlier this month, a fire at a private orphanage in central China's Henan Province killed 7 children. All of the victims were abandoned children with congenital conditions, and 6 of them were under the age of 5. 48-year-old Yuan Lihai set up the orphanage in her own home. Over the past 25 years, she's adopted more than 100 abandoned children. She's paid for their care using the meager income she gets as a market vendor and the subsistence allowance provided by the local government. Following the incident, the other orphans Yuan cared for are being looked after at local care centers. The tragedy has left her in deep shock and grief.
我的孩子烧死了，现在跟哪我不知道。现在我看看我俺小白妞跟他站着，妈妈呢？她说了，吃了好吃了好，我也想。别想他哈。想妈妈了。哎呀，你别想他。
Yuan became a focus of media attention as a result of the fire. Many have expressed their sympathy for her grief, but some suspected her motives. In a county of 760,000 residents, there is no official orphanage. Yuan became one of the main providers of care for abandoned children. But according to the local Civil Affairs Bureau, Yuan doesn't possess a license. The deadly fire has exposed major weakness in China's child welfare system.
A very tragic story. However, that story has been discussed and talked about recently a lot. And join us in the studio once again, Wen Tiejun and Raymond Zhou. Gentlemen, first of all, I want to throw out some numbers for you. At this moment, unofficial numbers suggest 1 million street children in China. This number could be bigger. Meanwhile, from the numbers of Ministry of Civil Affairs, there are 615,000 orphans here in this country. That number could be bigger also. And at the same time, official numbers suggest that 64, gentlemen, government-funded orphanages or children care homes for those on the street in China at county level. What do you think about the sharp contrast between these numbers?
It's incredible. Because nobody can give you what is the number come from, except this number from the official. So when you talk about 1 million street boy or street children, I don't know where is the data come from. I have no idea about such kind of data.
It is an estimate that I believe is probably much higher if the 600,000 officially recognized orphans is the right number. Because I've visited a couple of these organizations and I noticed that many of the children are left there by their parents, but their parents rarely visit. In the first couple of months, they may visit and deposit money, but later on they will come once a year and not give any money. And so these people orphans? Of course not. Theoretically, they are not orphans, but they are actually virtual orphans. And I'm sure there's a large number of that kind of orphan, virtual.
The reason I'm throwing out these numbers at the very beginning of our program is because there has been such a huge debate in China after the deadly incident, which was mentioned in our background report. The fire took away the lives of 7 people, including 1 young adult and 6 children. All of them are living in a, so far still, illegal orphanage, which is run by a private citizen. So many, after that incident, have been asking the question, Professor Wen, I want to invite your opinion here. Whose responsibility is it now to take care of these children who are obviously being marginalized in our society?
I think that it's what is the vocabulary of illegal? That is the very embarrassed word.
Illegal here, it seems to mean which is not legally registered with the relevant government organizations.
This is, I'm the first that I think that is very sad to hear such kind of information. But when I read this newspaper or TV stories talking about illegal, I'm somehow think that it's a wrong word to describe such kind of phenomena.
How to describe the situation then?
Because most of these social issues solved by the local people, by rural people by themselves, it's a very often. If you said that's illegal, means that they all are criminal, they are bad people, they need to put into the jail. What is the meaning?
Right.
And
are there illegal procedures that they can go to so that they can be legal in a way?
They cannot. You cannot ask these thousands of local people to go to registers when they do some good things. So the first I challenge what's the vocabulary of illegal in rural China. You can just imagine that you have a law system in urban area, and then many people maybe in urban area they can follow this law system. But in rural, it's very traditional society. And you cannot implement any law in these traditional rural villages. So, and also originally that they solve these social issues by the social community.
If people steal things, if people burn things, burn their houses, of course, it is illegal.
That is a criminal. That is but if a good people take, do some good things, care about these children, you said it's illegal. What does it mean?
Well, it's a technicality. I totally agree with Professor Wen that the legality of the issue is important, but we have to know that it's not that Yuan Lihai, the proprietor of this institution, did not want to register. It's that she could not register. In the case that I investigated, the couple could only register as a for-profit business. They could not register even as a regular non-profit organization.
The foster home.
Sure. Yeah, the foster home. And the government civil administrative department is fully aware of that. Actually, they put a lot of their orphans into the private foster homes.
So now, here's the thing. Can legal procedures and mechanism be established within a time frame?
By whom?
In which, of course, the government.
If
we're talking about the legal procedures.
And then you need to give a lot of money to subsidize these government officials and send them to countryside, to every village, and then house to check who is illegal, who is legal.
So you don't think it can be established, and there's no meaning of establishing
Even that you have a very good government view, but when you want to implement your good view, you need to think about how the cost you should pay.
You
how
tell
much
me,
is the cost?
Professor, we are facing this tragedy, and the society is debating about it. This is the best time to get things done. If this incident passed, we see several months pass, people will forget about this.
That is
so
another
this is the best thing. Let's talk about the practices. What can be the way out? Your prescription.
If you ask me, I think that this so-called reform period, we dismissed this local village community. We make these individual households take all of the responsibility by themselves. It's a bad thing. Many bad things happened because of such kind of reason. So we need reorganize the villagers as a kind of community. And then they can solve their problem by themselves.
Are you saying that the communes has to be established
again?
No,
it's different.
It is totally different from
concept.
The political concept.
No, it's a people's commune is originally working for the state industrialization, that is for the capital. But now we said we need to re-set up the people's, not commune, the people's community by villagers themselves. That is self-organization, self-management, and self-empowerment. And then you can give them some kind of subsidy. The governments give the money to this local community, and then they can solve the problem by themselves.
But on the other hand, I have to go to the professor again to follow up a little bit. Nobody is preventing them from establishing their own community. Obviously,
so that is the
this
problem.
lady, Yuan Lihai, who is obviously becoming such a controversial figure, she has taken on what she considers as her responsibilities as a county citizen, which namely to take care of the children who she doesn't even know. But she felt she had the responsibility to do that. And that's why this incident occurred. So one might argue, Professor, that this community is naturally formed. You do not necessarily have to have the government to play, once again, a big hand in this.
And the governments need to take the responsibility that we all know that. I think that the newspapers and TV, they talk a lot about how the government take such kind of responsibility. It's okay. But another side is society, especially in rural China.
Right.
You know, I need to give you some background. I think that people need to have to keep this bias away.
Go ahead.
And Lankao is a poor county.
The
I have been
specific
several
county
times.
in which this incident happened, I have to give some reference to our audience.
Sure. I need to tell you and all the audience that Lankao is a poor county, that I take this county as a kind of experiment zone. And several times to be there in field work. I mean, I also send my students, my assistant, to be the observers in this county. Let me tell you what is a very severe issue in this county. The government's budget deficit is a very, very big issue in this poor county. More than 70% of the government's budget need to subsidize from upper governments. So the local departments in county governments, they have no such kind of money for carry out the job that originally they have. I mean, you can assign that they have such kind of job, but you need to give them the cost, the money, and then they can do something. But if they have a very serious budget deficit, they can do nothing. And then also, 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there is a big corruption. It's a criminal, the leader of this county, and
A big scandal.
Yeah, I mean, this leader trying to absorb these so-called investments, but there's some bad things
All
happen,
right,
and
of
then
course.
there's gave a lot of debts to the county government.
So there are a lot of things happening over the history of this specific county, but what exactly is your point, particularly regarding the roadmap we have to draw right now after this very deadly incident?
We think that we need to focus on these local resources. We have a big social resources in countryside,
All right.
in rural area. You just give them a little bit funds, and then you can make them to organize themselves. And then it means that initiate social resources into social capital.
I see your point. Mr. Zhou, do you agree with that? First of all, somewhat financial support, certain extent, to the local community.
Yeah.
Then
Absolutely right.
space or freedom for the local community to serve themselves. Is that the way out?
Well, I think in the long run, it should be the government that takes the obligation for all these orphans, because we have a very strict definition for the orphans, and if nobody else is taking care of them, I think the central government should allocate a budget and account for every one of the country's orphans. But that involves a lot of money, right? So before doing that, the government can relax the adoption rules and regulations so that people who are caring and who are, say, distant relatives who want to adopt can adopt and put many of these orphans into private homes, because a home is always a much, much better place than even the best run orphanages.
That is also the international
Yes,
practice. But
yes.
from what you have just explained, it seems that the two of you are having a minor division of opinions.
Yes,
you
that's
are
true.
suggesting that the government should be 100% responsible for those children,
Well-
orphans, street children. Well, you seem to suggest, sir, that the
think
government
it's-
should play a minor role in providing certain resources, while at the same time let the local community prosper and flourish.
He's right. I think that the government.
You're changing your position
No,
now.
no, it's not. I said he is right, but we are very practical to think about such kind of a problem.
Yeah, it needs a lot of money.
Yeah, we
What I
think that
suggest.
even you think that government should to take the 100% of responsibility, but when you go into the local, especially in this poor county, it's a traditional agriculture area.
Right.
They have no such kind of tax resources. They have no enough industry and the commercial sectors. So by such kind of agriculture, any agriculture country can contribute a lot of tax and then take such kind of big responsibility. You can imagine. But when you practice, you need to be very practical to think about what is the real problem. That is my argument.
All right, we're going to continue our discussion on this very important issue because this is about the protection of children's rights here in China. We want to continue our discussion, gentlemen, right after this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're joining us for a live edition of Dialogue on CCTV News. Our topic today is protection of children's rights, particularly after a deadly incident recently in China of several orphan children. With me in the studio, we have Professor Wen Tiejun from Renmin University and also Raymond Zhou, columnist from China Daily. Earlier, gentlemen, you have responsibly provided your versions of solutions to some of the issues we see recently related particularly to this deadly incident. I want you to illustrate more about the minor division that you have seem to be government's role, local communities' role, whose responsibility is indeed to protect the children's rights, particularly these marginalized children. And secondly, I want you to help us to understand one interesting phenomenon, if I could use the word interesting. That is, on the one hand, you have these little emperors and little empresses here in China, the only child of the family. All of the love and the care and the resources and education, the best of everything being given to these children. But on the other hand, you see these marginalized children, street children, orphanage children. It seems that they're living in a totally different world, if I could say that. Help us to understand the phenomenon and why that is happening right now. Professor Wen.
Let me ask you the question like that.
You can't do that. I'm the host. No, go ahead, sir.
Think why there's no such kind of bad things in 1980s, even the early 1990s. And then after the 1990s, a lot of bad things happen, especially in countryside. Why?
Challenging things.
That's because originally they do have this local organization by local people themselves. A lot of things originally.
That's the community which has been formed
Community
for
can solve a lot
hundreds
of public affairs by themselves. Now you break it, this village community. That is the problem. So I'm not say that the governments need to give up their responsibility. Government need to do, but the government need to change their way to buy the service, the public service from the local people, from the local organization. There are so many. Let me tell you about. We have several hundreds millions aging people and female in countryside. They can do such kind of things to take care of these marginalized the children. When you talk about a million street boys, street children, they can do it. It's very low cost. If you set up a kind of government's departments, and then you need to pay everything very, very,
right.
Very high cost. So which one you choose? That is my challenge.
But then, of course, there's another challenge, according to your prescription of the solutions. How to monitor, that is one thing. How to make sure that the money is being allocated to the right place, that's also another thing. How to make sure that the people involved are doing things legally, while at the same time serving the best interests of the children. Of course, all of these parameters have to be set up so that this system, as you suggested, can work.
That is also my challenge. Why there is no such kind of problem in 1980s or before 1980s?
Because the society was very different. There's no mobility of the rural population.
No, at that time, nobody challenged, nobody asked is it legal or illegal. And nobody set up such kind of law system in countryside. And then people do it very, very active and by themselves. It's no problem. Why such kind of phenomena happened?
I think you're a little bit too reminiscent of the old days. There were also issues then.
No, 1980s we have started the so-called marketization. That is reform since from 1978. But 1980s is a decade, and then the beginning of 1990s. We dismiss this local community after the mid-1990s.
All right. I wonder whether we, quote unquote, dismiss these local communities, or there are different priorities now going on in the local communities. For example, making money, for example, traveling elsewhere to be the migrant workers, many other things. But Mr. Zhou, I know you have a lot of knowledge when you do investigative reporting in different parts of China. Your input here.
Well, my empirical knowledge is a lot of these orphans are actually disabled children or children with chronic illnesses. These are the kind of children that rural people or poor people cannot afford to raise. It's not that they don't have a loving heart. They do love their children, but they have to give it up. Otherwise, that child will bring down the whole family. So in that kind of situation, these children are not actually adoptable, many of them. I'm not saying all of them. So right now, from what I know, it's the charity organizations, both domestic and also international, that are doing the job where the government should actually be doing. And they have set up funds and organizations and mechanisms. For example, there's one British-based charity that's functioning in Beijing, and they actually subsidize private homes, just like Professor Wen said. The private homes, they place these orphans in private homes, and they give, say, 500 yuan each month to the private homes. And that kind of thing, they should be initiated by the government and should be run by these private organizations.
Well, there
so
are a
that
lot
the
of
government
things
can come back and check up on them.
Well, there are a lot of things that could, should, and could have and should have done by the government. But at this moment, it seems that things are only, certain things are only beginning to be addressed. So at this moment, it seems extremely important that we are discussing the question of one layer further, which is, you talk about the privately run orphanages, you talk about the informal charities in a way supporting the system. Now here in China, we all know with some of the recent cases, there has been a crisis of integrity and trust the public have about either philanthropy or about charities here in China. Of course, those questions have to be gradually addressed, but then it seems that this issue, when we talk about the marginalized children, how to take care of these children, it is not just one issue separate from the rest of all the other issues. It is very much all interconnected, intertwined. Professor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where to begin with?
From just now I talked about the 1990s. From the 1994, when we started our taxation reform, we are very much harmed the local administrative affairs. And then let me tell you another story. You may know the situation in local. And from that time, almost all of these government departments, they became a kind of corporation. And then every government cadre have a kind of a job to absorb this investigation.
Professor Wen always have a lot of stories based
and then
on
you
his
change
research
all
to tell.
the public affairs
But
into the private.
my question is, there is the crisis of integrity of trust. It's not just about one thing, it's about many other things. For example, philanthropy, charity, which is very much related to how to address these social issues. So with these intertwined issues, what can be your solution? Is your previous version still working?
Up to now, it's not easy to change such kind of situation because most of these public affairs departments change their essential into a kind of corporation. They became a company, and then you can trust these government departments to do the public affairs.
But you know yourself that many of the people there inside the government, for example, even Lankao County, which is county quite controversial these days, some of them, I would say, according to some different reports now you see in the media, have decided to provide funding last December for establishing. Where does the funding come from? I don't know at this moment, but there are exact numbers being allocated. There are plans talking about it. There's also research being done as to how many children there should be to be taken care of. It is going on. What I'm saying is the question not just about one county. It is about how to establish this overall system that can address not just children's issues, but many other welfare issues What is the most efficient mechanism and procedures to do that? As we know, that is urgently needed.
Well, I feel that the system should be centralized. It should be done by the Civil Affairs Ministry, but the whole job should be shared by the whole society. So, if you leave it to the local governments, then you can imagine on the coast where it's rich, can have all these foster homes and orphanages, where places like Lankao, they don't have the resources, right? So I feel that the need for centralization is very important. Another thing, just pick up on where Professor Wen left off is they should not have this market-driven, profit-driven mentality, because this is not where you can make money. This is where you put your heart and your dedication and your love and your money. So for the government, from the government point of view, it's a cost center. It's going to cost you a lot of money, and you scientifically map out the roadmap, as you said, and say how much resource you want to put on each orphan, and then have that job be shared by the private sector, especially the charity organizations, so that it won't be wasted. Nobody is suggesting that all the orphanages should be run and managed by government organizations. That's definitely not a good idea. But the government should take the role of supervision.
All right. This is one of those issues that need to be urgently addressed here in today's China, which is a very rapidly changing society. And we hope solutions are being drawn and can be efficiently implemented. And meanwhile, the society can have a way to monitor whether these solutions are working or not. We want to thank the two of you, gentlemen, for joining us on this discussion. Thank you so much for your input. And thank you for watching. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. Bye for now. Raymond Zhou, who is a columnist from China Daily. Welcome, sir.
Great to be here.
And also, we're very happy to be joined in the studio by Professor Wen Tiejun from Renmin University, who's an expert on China's rural issues. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
But before we go to a discussion with the two of you, gentlemen, let's take a look at this background report.
Earlier this month, a fire at a private orphanage in central China's Henan Province killed 7 children. All of the victims were abandoned children with congenital conditions, and 6 of them were under the age of 5. 48-year-old Yuan Lihai set up the orphanage in her own home. Over the past 25 years, she's adopted more than 100 abandoned children. She's paid for their care using the meager income she gets as a market vendor and the subsistence allowance provided by the local government. Following the incident, the other orphans Yuan cared for are being looked after at
Welcome to Dialogue, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. Nearly 2 weeks ago, 6 children and 1 young adult died in a fire at an illegal orphanage in Henan Province. In the days that have followed, many have asked questions about the quality of childcare in China. At a time when society is going through dramatic changes, what should be the role of government in protecting the most vulnerable members of our society? And more importantly, whose responsibility is it to protect the rights of young people, including the many abandoned or orphaned children? Joining us today in the studio to talk about this very important issue, we have then join us in the studio once again Wen Tiejun and Raymond Zhou. Gentlemen, first of all, I want to throw out some numbers for you. At this moment, unofficial numbers suggest 1 million street children in China. This number could be bigger. Meanwhile, from the numbers of Ministry of Civil Affairs, there are 615,000 orphans here in this country. That number could be bigger also. And at the same time, official numbers suggest that 64, gentlemen, government-funded orphanages or children care homes for those on the street in China at county level. What do you think about the sharp contrast between these numbers?
It's incredible, Because nobody can give you what is the number come from, except these
local care centres. The tragedy has left her in deep shock and grief.
我的孩子烧死了，烧死成现在跟哪我不知道。现在我看看我俺小白妞跟他站着，妈妈呢？他说了，吃了好，吃了好，我也想。别想他哈。想妈妈嘞。哎呀，你别想他。
Yuan became a focus of media attention as a result of the fire. Many have expressed their sympathy for her grief, but some suspected her motives. In a county of 760,000 residents, there is no official orphanage. Yuan became one of the main providers of care for abandoned children. But according to the local Civil Affairs Bureau, Yuan doesn't possess a license. The deadly fire has exposed major weakness in China's child welfare system.
A very tragic story. However, that story has been discussed and talked about recently a lot.
It's a number from the official. So when you talk about 1 million street boy or street children, I don't know where is the data come from. I have no idea about such kind of data.
It is an estimate that I believe is probably much higher if the 600,000 officially recognized orphans is the right number, because I've visited a couple of these organizations and I noticed that many of the children are left there by their parents, but their parents rarely visit. In the first couple of months they may visit and deposit money, but later on they will come once a year and not give any money. And so these people orphans? Of course not. Theoretically, they are not orphans, but they are actually virtual orphans. And I'm sure there's a large number of that kind of orphan, virtual.
The reason I'm